Everybody ready for a new session?
Yeah.
Okay. We have the creator of the famous Sitecore selfie video here, Sean Holmesby. So very proud that he was able to come from the US. And Sean's talking about Sitecore and NuGet. So Sean, take the stage, and it's yours.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Thanks everyone for joining. Today's presentation is going to be on Sitecore and NuGet working together in our development processes using NuGet with Sitecore development. As Robert said, my name is Sean Holmesby. I'm a solutions architect at Hedgehog Development. I'm a Sitecore MVP. I blog, I tweet, I jump on Slack, possibly more than I should. So if you've got any questions after this, I'm going to take some questions. Also, we've got the Hedgehog booth. Please come and meet us, talk to us about anything. We've got demos and everything, so come and talk to us, and hopefully we enjoy the ride. All right. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to go from the very basic, what is NuGet, how to use it. We're going to talk about the current status of Sitecore development. What are we currently doing? Then we're going to dive a bit deeper, and we're going to actually generate our own Sitecore and NuGet packages for our development process. And after that, to top it all off, we're going to show how we can actually improve our build process using NuGet. Throughout the slide as well, you might see some links, the tiny URL links. You can drop them down, but this slide deck will also be available after the presentation. So what is NuGet? Just a quick show of hands. Who doesn't know what NuGet is? I know you're lying. And okay, that's probably a bit bad that you should never ask, like, who doesn't. Who here wants to prove they don't know something in front of the rest of the crowd? Okay, who knows what NuGet is? Okay, who currently uses NuGet with their Sitecore development? Good. All right, so we've got a good amount of people. Essentially, NuGet is a package manager for .NET development. The tool itself can help manage dependencies and of other packages and pull in content and libraries into your solution. So in particular, what we're going to look at is bringing in DLLs for references in our code. So that can be, pulling in a DLL, it's referenced in your solution, and that's what we're really looking at here. Then comes the dependencies on those packages, and just sort of how that works behind the scenes. Lastly, the NuGet gallery is a public feed. It's a public repository, so most people would use that. But there's also other ways to set up your own local and private repositories, which we'll dive into as well. Cool, so let's start with a demo of using NuGet. Okay, I'm just going to jump out here, jump over to my code. All right. Okay, so we're just going to start with a very basic sort of thing, project. I'm going to create just a blank project, web application, my Sitecore project, just going to create that. And when we get the option here, we're actually going to scaffold it with MVC. So essentially, this is just going to build out the scaffolding for a regular MVC project. And the way it actually does this is it pulls in what it thinks is the NuGet packages that you would actually typically want in an MVC application. So this is going to go, it's going to connect to our public repository. And you see here, it's actually adding the NuGet packages to the project. And once it's all done, we can actually open up this packages.config file, and we can see all of the NuGet packages that it's brought in. Pretty basic stuff. Most of you have seen this before. One of the interesting things to actually think about here is what version numbers of these packages are we using? So if we look down here into newtonsoft.json, most people would have seen this package. We see it's using version 6.0.4. Now, depending on which Sitecore instance you're on, that version is actually different. Typically from, I think, back in the 5, version 6, version 7.1, 7.2 of Sitecore, and even I think 7.5, this NuGet package version was 4.5.9 from memory. Up into the later version, Sitecore 8, we're using 6.0.3, and even up now in Sitecore 8.1 update 2, we're using 6.0.8. Okay, so this is just one thing to sort of recognize here, because I've just gone and created an MVC application, and straight away I'm using the wrong version of newtonsoft.json to what my Sitecore instance is already using, which could bring about some problems. Cool, so we'll just open up this on the file system. Okay, we go to the packages directory, and we can see that these are the packages here. We can open up newtonsoft.json, and here's our new pack. This is our NuGet package file. We can actually open this up in the NuGet Explorer, the NuGet Package Explorer. And we can see here that this is actually just containing some framework folders and a couple of Newtonsoft DLLs. Now we're dealing with .NET 4.5. This is the one that we're actually going to be worried about. Technically, we don't really need the other folders, because it's all going to be figured out when we install this package in our solution. So what we can do here is actually save the metadata, and I'm just going to go to dtemp my Sitecore project. Let's just save it in the same location as the package before. And you can see this is saving a new spec file. This new spec file is just a piece of basic XML, which describes how to actually build that package, right? We see here, there's a whole bunch of files, and you can see the different framework versions here. So we really don't need this, okay? So let's just delete that. Let's delete some other versions that we don't really need. We can just sort of slim down this package if we want. All right, so let's save that, exit. And now, again, I just open this new spec file in the NuGet Package Explorer. And when we expand the lib now, we see only the .NET 4.5 versions, right? So it's sort of slimmed it down. This is just really detailing what a NuGet package is. Very basic, all here, and easily editable if we want. Cool. All right. And you can name this whatever you want. You can version it, and you can even upload it to the public repo if you really wanted to. All right, cool. So that's NuGet in a nutshell. Essentially, using NuGet, we've created these packages, and what we can actually do is set up our private repo. So let's jump over here. We're going to go to Manage NuGet Packages. You can see here I've actually got a couple of different repos set up. Essentially, what this is doing is going to say, okay, instead of going to the public repo, I can have a folder locally and look there. You can see here I've got a Hedgehog NuGet. That's because internally in Hedgehog, we have our own internal server, and we actually put our packages there, and everyone just pulls off that package when they install. So we've got our custom packages in there. We've sometimes got our third-party packages, which we've downloaded in there, all for easy use. Cool. And so essentially using NuGet, it's a fairly simple thing. So here I've gone, you right-click on the project, manage NuGet packages. We get this this dialog here, so we can go to the public feed. Let's have a look at something like AutoMapper. Okay, and we're going to go browse. So we search for AutoMapper, and it's as simple as this: just install the package into our repository, into our project. Right? And now, if we open up that packages.config, we should be able to see AutoMapper is installed. And on top of that, we've got our reference to the AutoMapper DLL brought in. You can use the UI to be able to install packages. You can even change the version of it and install different versions. I think this is a new thing in Visual Studio 2015. Update 1. Okay, 2015 update 1 has now got that. Finally, because the way that you used to have to do that is via the Package Manager console. Now, this Package Manager console isn't that difficult, right? So if I want to actually install, say, a different version of, say, Newtonsoft, right? So here, let's go update package. I can do newtonsoft.json and do version, and we want 6.0.8. Right? Now, Newtonsoft JSON is actually up to version 8 something now. We're using 6.0.8 because that's what Sitecore is currently using. Right? Package Manager console, we run this command. We can do install, uninstall, update, just about everything there. Force uninstall if you want. And essentially, it's going to do the same thing as the UI. The key thing here is this is not really a difficult thing, right? People sometimes get scared off by a console. Fine, just use the UI. It's really not that hard. And I think I've got, oh, I've pointed to the wrong directory. There we go. Let's just do this. Okay, so it's not a difficult thing. And to actually prove how not difficult this is, the other night, so I was at my hotel room, and I've come over here with my baby daughter and my wife. Now, my baby daughter's jet lagged, so she's quite exhausted at the moment. And so it's the middle of the night, and I'm like, great, I can do some work, you know? And the baby daughter starts howling. Now, I'm going through some of the stuff on the TDS version of Habitat. So everyone's learned about Habitat and everything. Here we've got the TDS version of it. We've got our serialization actually into the TDS projects, up to date and everything. And one thing I wanted to do was say, well, instead of doing what Habitat does to reference DLLs, let's use these Sitecore and NuGet packages that we're going to create and update them. Now, my baby is crying the house down at this stage. And my wife's sitting there going, come on, you've got to do something here. And I'm sort of like, I want to get out of this. I've got to do some work. Unless you think you can do the work while I look after the baby, fine. Well, she called my bluff on that. And essentially, that's my wife sitting in front of my Visual Studio. And just a little background on this, my wife is actually a physical therapist. She knows nothing about code. And she goes, tell me, how do I do it? And I opened up the package manager console, and I said, just type this and press enter, and then change the project, and type this and press enter. And within 2 minutes, she got this. So it's really not that hard. And to prove, you know, my bad parenting skills, you'll probably hear the baby in the background. But I secretly filmed my wife doing this. You can probably guess what word was beeped out there. Yeah, so essentially it's not a difficult thing. There is a physical therapist who knows nothing about code using NuGet. It's that simple. She's probably not happy that I put that into the slide deck either. Cool, so of Sitecore development with NuGet. Now, if you actually do a search for Sitecore on the public NuGet repository, you'll actually get some results back. So some typical ones that we know of, we've got dynamic placeholders is one. There's a couple of different versions out there. There's an MVC version as well. FakeDB is another one. A couple of ORMs like Fortis, GlassMapper. Any other ones people shout out? Shout out names of packages you know in public. No? Rocks? Was it? Sitecore Rocks? I think Sitecore Rocks is like an extension you can use in Visual Studio, which you do download through the extension manager. But yeah, packages for solutions as well. Unicorn's a NuGet package. What was that one? Dev configs, yeah, so you can speed up development for performance. So I did a search on here, and there's actually 270 different Sitecore packages, or at least mention Sitecore, at least in their README or something, on the public repository. So there's a fair few out there. Some other features, so we mentioned Sitecore Rocks. We can actually download that through the extension manager in Visual Studio. We've also got, within Sitecore Rocks itself, you have the ability, oops, sorry, let's just bring that up. Cool. Within Sitecore Rocks itself, you actually have the ability to package up Sitecore items. So you essentially do the same thing, you serialize items, and you can put that into a NuGet package, which you could share amongst your team. Similar to, we have TDS, where TDS has the same feature. You can have shareable framework items. So you have a framework, you pass it from one project to another, and you just package them up in a NuGet package. And one new thing in TDS version 5.5 is the build components. So if you're building from a cloud server, you actually have the ability to package up TDS's build components, and instead of having to install it on the build server, because it's a cloud build, you just install the NuGet package for the build server components, and you can actually run your TDS scripts from there. Cool. So one thing on that, these projects, they're all downloadable, and you can do what I just did before. You can actually change the new spec file and modify the code if you want, and repackage the NuGet package locally if you want. One thing with Glass Mapper, we've actually had a client that said, well, we've got so many solutions building into the one project. Now, Glass Mapper in V4 actually updated everything to be in the one NuGet package. Now, we needed to change that because we only wanted the initialization phase to run once. So we took apart Glass Mapper, split it out into its own components, and just used that internally in our projects, and it actually works pretty well. Cool. So that's NuGet in a nutshell, how you pull in NuGet packages. But how has Sitecore development been different? Now, if you look on shared source modules, one of the things you'll notice is that usually there's a README file that says, hey, find these Sitecore DLLs and copy them into this directory, all right? So we actually did a bit of a check on GitHub to find out what was doing that. And you can see here, there's a couple of results. A couple of READMEs, there's a git ignore as well. But essentially, we look over here, text and markdown. There's 1,500 different references to Sitecore kernel DLL. Most of those, I'm guessing, would be in a README file saying copy it here. Now, the thing is, where do you copy it to? Because there's no standard. Someone says copy it to a lib folder. Someone says copy it to an installers folder. Someone says copy it to Sitecore lib. And then copy only these files, and only some. And then you've got something like Habitat, which uses a script to say, let's just copy all of them into that folder, and they'll just all be there. Really, Sitecore development, you don't need all of those files. You just need the ones you're actually using in your project. So it sort of raises a bit of a question, right? Because we've got these README files essentially to say, do not publish Sitecore DLLs. It's in a license that you're not allowed to publish them. But then comes the complexity of where do you push them? What do they actually look like? Where do we move them? Which ones do we move? Do we move all? I don't want them all. And it just raises the ultimate question.
I don't want a lot, I want just enough. So why is it got to be so damn tough?
Just wanted to wake you all up a bit, sorry. Okay, so we've got this idea that we've got NuGet packages except our Sitecore DLLs. We do something different for it, right? So why wouldn't we just actually create a way to create our own packages? Now, in this way, we could create our own packages, don't upload them anywhere, and use NuGet's feature to just automatically restore those packages in our solution, right? Now, the thing is, everyone needs to sort of have those NuGet packages in their local repository, and then when we do a restore, it just pulls them in to our solution, and we build and run the code. So we mentioned before, we've got a private repo we can set up locally. You can use an internal one per company, and then use the package restore to just retrieve those the packages into our projects. So let's have a look at setting up a private repository. Okay, so let's jump over here. Again, I'm just going to go into the Manage NuGet Packages dialog. I'm going to click on the settings icon. And we see here, these are the different ones that I've got already installed. I'm just going to create a new one, and let's just call this SUGCON NuGet. And I'm just going to choose a file, a folder, and let's just create a new directory there, right? Okay, so that's now set up that we've got our repository. There we go, SUGCON NuGet. We can just clear that, and we know we don't have anything there. Let's go and grab AutoMapper. And all I'm going to do is just copy this into that directory to prove that it works. Okay, and I might actually just go to Newtonsoft as well. Grab Newtonsoft and paste that in there. We're jumping back to Visual Studio, just do a refresh, and there's our projects there, our packages. So you see here, we could build our own packages, put them in a local repository, and run them from there. Other options are an internal feed, so you might use something like ProGet, which is more of like a database-backed NuGet repository, and essentially you set up a feed so people can pull them in. You can use NuGet.server, which is you create a web application, empty web application, pull in NuGet.server, and it's going to create your NuGet repository there and then, and you just run the site as in IIS and access it that way. And there's some others out there as well, like cloud build servers sometimes have their own NuGet repository, and you can upload it to that private NuGet repo. Okay. Let's jump back in. Okay. Cool. So the problem with this is if we're all defining our own NuGet packages, what's to say one person is naming it one thing and another person's naming it another? What's to say someone's not including 10 DLLs and someone's not including one? We need sort of a standard for this. So let's just have a look at some of the options here, some ones that are already out there. We've got the name of the packages named SC dot at the front. We can also see that there's third-party NuGet packages referenced here, HTML Agility Pack. That's a publicly accessible package, right? We look next, we've got, there's no dot in between Sitecore and buckets or Sitecore and Experience Editor. So these package names are a little bit different as well. But you can see here that these are sort of smaller groups, like something like Sitecore Content Search might actually not be just the Sitecore Content Search DLL, but a group of them, right? And then here we've got the dots in them, but every version package is 1.0, right? Having a look at the content of those packages, Sitecore Analytics, single DLL. Sitecore Content Search actually has multiple DLLs, so this is sort of good for development to quickly bring those in. You only install one package and you get all those DLL references. And Sitecore Analytics, we've sort of got a small group, Sitecore Analytics and Analytics Model, but we're still using version 1. So what's that, Sitecore 1? That's, there wouldn't be an Analytics DLL there. That's proof that that wouldn't work. All right. So we need sort of a standard for this, right? Because there's different ways to do it. Go and create your own, create your new spec files and bring them all in how you like them. So how can we have a standard? Well, there's the NuGet package generator that is out there on GitHub. And even so, that NuGet package generator has changed over time, so that standard hasn't been finalized either. But essentially, the discussion for the NuGet package generator has started. The code has already started to be built, and we've got something that we think should be the norm for NuGet package generation. So let's just have a quick look at this. I'm going to just jump out and show the NuGet package generator. So the code, I'm not going to run through all the code here, but we're just going to jump into the properties here. So I can essentially run this. I'm going to go, let's open AD Sitecores, and there's all my Sitecore versions. Copy that name. Let's go paste this in here. So I'm just going to point this to this is like a Sitecore zip that you just get, which you use for installing Sitecore out of the box. And I'm going to put this in d/temp/ so SUGCON NuGet. Okay, so let's save that. And what we can do now is actually just run this application. It's just going to look at that zip. Should get our command line. Okay, so this is going to point at this zip. And what this is going to do, this is running the latest code of the NuGet package generator. It's going to look at all the DLLs in that zip, and it's going to create an individual package for each of those DLLs. Then on top of it, it's actually going to create groups of packages. So say we want 5 DLLs to come in. We're going to create a core group package, which is going to just reference those single packages as dependencies. This way you can be a bit more effective as a developer. You just pull in a core group packages, and it's going to pull in 5 for you. So that takes a bit of time to run. Let's just have a look at this. Okay, so I mentioned the single DLL packages. It's also got custom group packages for easy development. It's going to pull in a complete full Sitecore. Oh, that's jumped out. Okay, so it's going to run a complete Sitecore package. So we'll just continue this, and let's go to our folder. There's all of our packages generated. There's Sitecore. there's all our individual ones. And if I go to the end, we've got an as files package and an as links package. These are typically not used in general development. There's something called Sitecore Bootcamp, which is the current project from the creator of Sim. Still not finalized, but that's something that he's using this for. And we can see here, this is generating our NuGet packages for us. Okay. So let's just jump back in. Cool. All right, so with all those packages now, we've got the ability to pull in just the DLLs that we want, and we've got the ability to pull in groups of DLLs to speed up development. And this sort of brings a point about the DLL references in Sitecore. Now, when you start talking about what do I want to actually pull into my project, another approach is to use Cucumber Digital's branch. And what they did is say, for Sitecore.kernel, which DLLs does it reference to say, pull those packages in as well. Now it uses reflection. If you ever look at Sitecore kernel in ILSpy or .peak or something, you actually see it references a whole bunch of DLLs that you don't really need. So it's a good idea to sort of go, okay, what else do I need to bring in? However, if you look at the differences here, the NuGet package generators on the top, we said core group is essentially just newtonsoft.json and Sitecore kernel. But the reflected one using Cucumber Digital's approach brings in several DLLs that we might not actually need in our development. So it's a great idea, except it just sort of pulls in a couple too many. Then there's Adam Con's approach, where essentially you set up your Sitecore site as the NuGet server itself. So on initialization, it creates the packages for you, and then you connect to it to pull in those packages. It's an interesting approach. Again, sort of the definition of those packages are different. And again, we see that 1.0 versioning, which, is that going to be for Sitecore 8? Is it going to be Sitecore 7? We don't know, right? There is a way to sort of standardize that, and I'm going to work with Adam to sort of like set the standard on that. But essentially, that's just another possibility. So this discussion sort of came about, like, what is the standard if people are creating their own generators and creating their own packages? So we went onto the community forums and sort of said, what does everyone want? If you go to this link, you can actually see everyone's opinions on there, some packages that we defined, and essentially we came up with single DLLs with the core group packages. It's going to use a naming convention that everyone knows. So there's no SC dot at the front. It's just, you want Sitecore kernel, pull in Sitecore kernel. Right, Sitecore.kernel. It's only going to package Sitecore DLLs. Now, it's not going to pull in Newtonsoft. It's not going to create HTML agility pack, because the moment you use one of those, the next time you actually use the public repository one as well, you can have your Newtonsoft JSON coming from public repository and your Newtonsoft JSON coming from your own custom package. And whichever one comes last, that's the one that wins. And if this is 6.0.5 and this is 6.0.8 or 3.2.1 or whatever it is, then you're going to have conflicts. And that leads to something that we'll come to a little bit later called DLL-Hell. Right, so the correct third-party package references are used. We're going to look at Sitecore, the instance you're working on, say, hey, you're working on Sitecore 8.1 update 2. I know that Newtonsoft JSON is 6.0.8 for that version. So let's make that as our third-party dependency when we're using something like a web API, right, which is going to pull it in. So this is the reason why do we need the correct versions? Because of that clash, that DLL-Hell that we can come to. Whoever snapped that pic, that's awesome. That's a really cool one. DLL-Hell is essentially that. We've got one DLL coming from one place, one DLL coming from the other, named the same thing. Which one is built last wins, right? So to find a definition of that, Stack Overflow, it's when application A installs a shared DLL version 1.0, and application B comes in with updates using version 1.1, which should be compatible, but it's slightly different, and then suddenly application A stops working. I love this. Application A, application B starts like, which one built next, put it in, and imagine that with multiple projects, right? Not just two using different versions. So let's make sure we're using the same version. And for me personally, the best way is to know what version Sitecore is using, because then I'm not going to break whatever Sitecore is already doing. Right? You can use assembly redirects and things like that, but it's going to be a little bit of overkill sometimes. If you don't need a new version, don't use it. Just use what Sitecore uses. And that way we can sort of avoid this DLL-Hell where different projects are using different DLL versions. So with that as well, when you can use assembly redirects, there's a thing called semantic versioning, and semantic versioning is supposed to be, you know, the major, minor, and build changes that will change throughout a solution. So really, unless you're going from 5.0 to 6.0 or something like that, there shouldn't be any incompatibility. The problem is people are defining these packages, right? And people make mistakes. So you can say, oh, I'm only using, you know, it's using 4.5.9 and it's upgrading to 4.5.11. Everything should work. And I'll just do an assembly redirect and it'll work. If you do that, keep in mind you're at the will of the developer creating that package who could be breaking your site unintentionally. So this is one of those things to be aware about. If you're using the same version, then you're less likely to hit those issues. So what versions are we using? I mentioned 6.0.9 of NewtonSoft. Essentially, I created this NuGet package discoverer. You can see the link there. I'm not going to run through the code at the moment, but you do the same thing with your code to say, point to a zip of Sitecore. Let's go scan those DLLs that are in there. And for each of those, let's try and find what the NuGet package is on the public NuGet repository, right? Now, the problem here is not all Sitecore DLLs out of the box, not all the third-party packages, DLLs have packages on the public repository. So let's have a look here. We can see here, this is, yeah, we've got a couple of links here that you can actually check out. This is the Sitecore 8 update 1 and 2, the packages that are used. We can see here NewtonSoft.json is 608, so we've got that correct. And below this is a whole bunch of DLLs that don't actually have packages. So we just mention there's no NuGet package for this. And then there's other DLLs that have corresponding NuGet packages, but there's not the same version available on the public repo, right? So it's just one of those things to be aware about if you're mixing DLL versions and things. But Sitecore itself in the zip, they don't quite have everything in the right version or the newest version. Or I think Baz actually wrote a nice blog post detailing where these packages come from, what versions they're from, and things that date back to like 2013 or 2012, something like that. Yeah, very old packages. So just start to be aware of these DLLs, these versions, what Sitecore is using, what you're using, and what could break. Because if you can rule this out as one of those possibilities that, oh, my website's broken because I used the wrong package, then you'll save yourself and your DevOps team a whole lot of time. Cool. So as I mentioned, some match the public feed, some match the package name but not the version, and some don't even have a public version. So yeah, just be aware of that. So the easy consumption of packages is that core group thing where we want to pull in multiple at once. To do this, we've got references to other single DLLs that you might want with it, but also the third-party package versions that also come with it. Sitecore MVC, you will obviously want Microsoft's MVC NuGet package, right? So we use something like the NuGet package discoverer to go, okay, to create sitecore.mvc.core group, I'm going to say it's dependent on Sitecore kernel, and I'm also going to say it's dependent on Microsoft ASP.NET MVC for the version that you're looking to build right now. And so he's going to pull in 5.2.3 for Sitecore 8.1. The naming of these packages, that was a bit of contention. So I went with core group. Ideally, I'd use the name .core as the thing, but unfortunately, Sitecore uses analytics model.core, I think it is. There's also a marketing.core NuGet package, so that's going to be a conflict. We wanted this to be future-proof. We're going to create core group packages that no one's ever going to clash with. So core group I came up with, I suggested it in the forum as it's good enough that it describes what it is, and it's bad enough that no one will ever use it, right? So hopefully everyone else sees it that way. There's been internal conflict about that. I'm not going to use bundle because someone will use it. Core group, you've got to have a good reason to use core group if you're not going to clash in the future. Cool, thank you. All right, so this brings us to how can we actually make this improve our build process? Essentially, what we want to do is build our NuGet packages, pull them in and actually make them work. And we can actually do this for shared source code as well, where we're actually applying to GitHub. So let's have a look.
Check this out.
All right. Just love waking people up like that. All right, so here we have Launch Sitecore. Launch Sitecore is a demo site. We've got the MVC version. This is on the latest Sitecore 8 update 1. We've already got some NuGet packages already installed. And unfortunately, we can jump over, let's see here. Unfortunately, someone has broken the build. So let's go here. Oh, look at this. This Sean Holmesby guy broke the build intentionally. What a bastard. This is AppVeyor. AppVeyor is a cloud build website. It's free for open source projects. So what we can actually do is hook up AppVeyor to our GitHub repo and do builds via that. Now, because it's a cloud build server, we mentioned those TDS packages before. We can actually install the TDS NuGet packages into our project and have TDS go and package that up into a .update package in our cloud build, right? Now we see here that the build is broken. I'm just going to go and fix that. Let's go to the package manager console. I'm just going to prime this. So let's go Sitecore NuGet and MVC. Now I said how easy this was before, so I hope I don't eat my own words here and make this make stuff up here. Okay, so we're going to use Sitecore client core group because that happens to be the package that Sean Holmesby guy screwed up before. Let's install it to core group is going to bring in the Sitecore client DLL. It's also going to reference Sitecore kernel and pull that in as well. Okay. Okay, that's installed. Let's just save that. Okay, and we're going to go to Git extensions, and as any good developer does, they don't do a local build first, and they just commit straight to source control. Okay, we've got this demo. I'm just going to commit this. Okay, so we've got some NuGet package references are added in here, packages.config, so let's add all of those, and fixed build. And let's commit and push that. Okay, let's jump back over to AppVeyor. And you see here, this is detected that it's hooked up to my GitHub repo. It's actually going to go, hey, new change, let's rebuild. It's going to run through the general build of the solution. It's going to use TDS's build components to actually create the update package. But it's also got its own private repo. NuGet repo already uploaded my Sitecore NuGet packages too, right? So the DLLs aren't public, they're still in my local. They're just in the actual build server's NuGet repo. It's then going to build the solution using the references to those Sitecore DLLs through the NuGet packages. And it should be running now. Cool. We've got a script here. We're going to use a Git version. So just while that builds, I'm just going to run over here. We've got an AppVeyor YML. This is basically just your configs for setting up AppVeyor. It says like, you know, what configuration do we want to use? We've also got a thing to say, hey, let's do a NuGet package restore. So it's going to pull those in automatically. We're also using Git version. Now what Git version is going to do is when I do a tag on my my Git repo, and tags are commonly used with something like Git flow or GitHub flow. Tag is like a release that I'm going to push out. I'm going to tag it, and when I commit that change, AppVeyor actually detects that, and when it does the build, it grabs the .update package as the artifact of the build and automatically uploads it to GitHub. with the tag release, which is a pretty cool feature. So you see here, this is 3100 that I've already done. This is going to run through and it's going to say, hey, this wasn't a tag release, so we're just going to do a regular build. And once that's done, there we go, build success. So Sean Holmesby broke and fixed the build, which is great. So I'm just going to reload this. Artifacts. We see here the artifacts. I've set it up to build our DLLs. We've also got our update package, which we can download. And as I mentioned, on tag releases, this is automatically updated to GitHub. So all in all, that's Sitecore development with these Sitecore NuGet packages. We now have a standard for updating and creating these NuGet packages. And all this really needs from a local development perspective is you pull down the GitHub repo and restore the packages and run a build. And sometimes that even happens, depending on your settings, happens when you run the build. So it's that simple. Now we can have shared source code, not have to put up Sitecore's DLLs because that breaks the license agreement, and we actually use these packages all together. And the nicety here is we're using TDS to actually create an update package to go with our tag releases in GitHub. I'll save you from playing that audio clip again. So if you want the generator, go to tinyurl.com, SC NuGet generator. This is essentially a fork of Alan Pellin's original generator. I've updated it to do those third-party DLL checks and dependency checks. And it's also taken out a couple of the issues with the naming conventions. It's all up there available. You can generate your own code. You can even make some modifications to Sitecore Instance Manager, which also has generation in it, and use this code instead. Once my pull request gets accepted, you'll get a new version of SIM and it'll actually be in there. So that's essentially it. That's the NuGet package generator. It's available. Go and package all the things. We know we love it. So thank you for everyone. If you want to chat to me afterwards or chat anything about TDS, NuGet package generation, or just how good you thought lunch was, come over to the Hedgehog booth. We've got one set up outside. Find me with a couple of beers in my hand tonight. I'm definitely going to get stuck into that. Cool. So thank you for having me.